My wife has always been the one to cook around the house, and as an Italian, it's one of the reasons I fell so hard for her. I've offered to help out in the kitchen or even cook for her sometimes, but she's always firmly, yet politely, told me no. I can't really blame her because I did not get either of my parents' good cooking genes. Because of this, I've always been sure to thank her for every meal, and I've taught my children to do the same. For the past year or so, my son has been watching a ton of cooking videos on YouTube and TikTok, and he's really been wanting to try his hand at cooking. My wife was happy to teach him, and at least twice a week, the two of them will go out to the store, buy ingredients for a meal he found on TikTok, and come home and make it. It's been awesome seeing them bonding more, since they haven't really had much overlap in interests before this. About a month ago, after dinner, my son asked his mom if he could try making us all a meal on his own. I said it sounded like a great idea, and she hesitated for a little while before agreeing. So that Saturday, she took him to the store to get his ingredients, and then he got to work. She supervised here and there, but he insisted that she didn't need to. So eventually, she came to the living room and sat with my daughter and me, looking a little bit dejected. I reassured her that I was sure he would still want to cook with her. He just wanted to try it out on his own. That seemed to help out a little, but she still seemed a little off. When he finished and we all sat down to eat, I was honestly surprised at just how well he managed to do on his own. I feel bad saying it, but even after a year or so of cooking with his mother, I expected him to mess up more than he did. I wanted to encourage this interest of his, so I made sure to let him know while I was eating how well he did, and gently bring up the few mistakes he had made. I did it a lot more than I usually would with my wife's cooking, and in hindsight, I can see that that's what started all of this. His sister, being his little sister, was not as supportive as I was, and quite rudely insulted his cooking. I was going to tell her to mind her manners and be thankful that he cooked for us when my wife made a sound and pushed her plate away, before agreeing and saying that it was too salty and overcooked. This took me aback, and I could tell my son took it hard too, as his mood visibly dropped. I didn't say anything at the time, since my wife and I never argue in front of the kids, and I just kept up the praise of my son's cooking, as his mother picked at the plate for a little while longer, before she took her and our daughter's plates to the kitchen. A little while later, I had gone to check on my son, and I could tell that he had been crying, so I comforted him, told him I was sure his mother loved the food and that she was probably just having a bad day, not to take it personally. Then later, once the kids were asleep, I confronted her about it, and she tried to just brush it off, but I pushed, and she got mad and said that I complimented his cooking far more than I ever complimented hers. This caught me off guard since I didn't expect my wife to be jealous of our son, and I unfortunately let out an involuntary scoff at this. She blew up at me for laughing, and we ended up arguing for a while before eventually I managed to explain that I was complimenting him so much because I wanted to encourage him to keep cooking, and she even admitted that she shouldn't have been so harsh about it. She said she would apologize to him, and I figured that everything was settled. That Monday, when I was driving my son to school, I noticed he wasn't acting normal and looking out the window, trying to hide his face from me. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me he was fine, but I could tell he was fighting back tears, so I asked him again, and he broke and told me that after I had left to get the car started, she told him that she was going to be cooking alone again from now on. I was furious about this, but kept my cool, and told him I would talk to her about it, bought him a snack from the store before dropping him off at school. I left work early so I could get home before the kids and talk to my wife. I'll admit I didn't handle it as well as I could have, and we ended up in a shouting match where I was calling her childish for being so vindictive towards our son because she was upset with me, and she called him a baby and said he shouldn't be so sad about not being allowed to cook, since it wasn't a man's job to do so anyway. We ended up leaving each other alone to cool down, and when our kids got home, my wife took our daughter out and came back later with a load of toys and clothes for her. I knew immediately what she was trying to do, and that night I told her that I would not let her use the money I make for our family to punish my son. She didn't take this well, and we ended up arguing again. I slept in the guest room and have been up to this point. For this past month, my wife has kept up this vindictive showering of our daughter with attention and gifts, while almost entirely ignoring my son. I've been talking to my parents and brother about this, and while they agree that she's wrong, they also don't see it as that big of a problem and think it'll sort itself out. At this point, with how she's been treating our son, I'm starting to fall out of love with her. But I also don't want to just jump to divorce if there's something that I can do to fix this whole situation. I can honestly say that we've never had a fight this big. Sure, we bicker every now and then, but she's never taken that out on my son in the past. I feel responsible and guilty about what happened, and I've been trying to do nice things for my son when I can. But I also don't want to mirror my wife's behavior, so I've also been taking my daughter with us about half the time we go places. But whenever we do, she's been very rude and always talks about all the stuff her mother does for her lately, because she knows it bothers her brother. Seeing the way my wife has been treating our son has made me second-guess our marriage, but I don't want to just jump straight to divorce either. Any advice on what I should do or how to best bring up the topic of therapy would be appreciated. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. It seems like the trigger for your wife was you seemingly favoring your son over her. She isn't seeing your son as her son. She's seeing him as competition for your affection, which means everything you are doing to try to protect him or get her to be nicer to him will just reinforce her belief that you are on his side. The favoritism toward your daughter is to make sure your daughter is on her side. Your wife is deeply insecure, possibly diagnosably so. Your best chance at getting back to a loving family unit is professional help. Comment 2. Why does your wife resent your son so much? Such an odd thing for her to get upset about. Does she think your son is going to pick up all the cooking and she'll be out of a job? Bizarre response to a 12-year-old not perfecting a recipe on the first try. She seems mean. I've had my little cousins bake stuff for me, and even when it's not spectacular or barely edible, I would never put them down like this. Your wife is cruel, and your daughter is shaping up to be just like her. Great example she's setting there. Now, for the update. Thanks for sticking around for another update. So things have escalated since I last wrote. My wife, she's been on this warpath, and it's like she's a different person. I thought we'd hit rock bottom, but it turns out there was a basement. She's been taking my daughter out more, and it's like she's buying her love or something. My son, he's been left in the dust, and it's tearing me up inside. I tried to talk to my wife, really sit down and hash it out, but she's got this wall up. She says she's just bonding with our daughter, but come on, we all know what's going on. It's like she's punishing my son for being good at something she loves. It's messed up. Then, out of nowhere, my son's school calls. He's been in a fight. Can you believe it? My boy, the one who wouldn't hurt a fly, is throwing punches. I rush over there, and it's a mess. He's suspended for a week, and the other kids' parents are talking about pressing charges. My son, he's all quiet. Won't tell me what started it, but I can guess. It's got to be all this tension at home, right? I'm at my wit's end, so I do something I thought I'd never do. I go behind my wife's back and set up a therapy appointment for my son. I figure it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission at this point. The therapist, she's good, gets my son talking, and he spills it all. He's been feeling like he's nothing compared to his sister, like he's invisible. I'm feeling hopeful, like maybe we're getting somewhere, but then my wife finds out about the therapy. She's livid, says I'm undermining her, making her out to be the bad guy. We have it out big time, and I'm thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe we're done. But then she does something I didn't expect. She breaks down, starts crying about how she feels replaced by our son in the kitchen, how she's scared of not being needed. It's raw, and it's real, and I feel for her, I really do. So I make a call. I cancel the therapy behind my son's back. I think, maybe we can fix this at home, you know? I tell my wife we'll work it out, just us, no therapists, no outside help. I think I'm doing the right thing, keeping the peace, keeping us together. But it's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. My son, he's more withdrawn than ever, and my daughter, she's turning into a mini version of her mother, all entitlement and no empathy. The house is like a minefield, and I'm tiptoeing through it, trying to keep everyone happy. I've been talking to my brother about it, and he says I'm just delaying the inevitable. But I can't help it. I want to believe we can get back to how things were. I'm holding on to this idea that we're a happy family, but it's slipping through my fingers. And now, my son's talking about going to live with my parents for a while. It's like a punch to the gut. I feel like I'm losing him. And it's all because I thought I could fix things on my own. I should have stuck with the therapy, should have fought for it, but I didn't. And now I'm watching my family crumble, and I'm wondering if I'm the one who knocked the first brick loose. Thanks for reading this mess of mine. My boyfriend said he needed closure with an ex from 8 years ago. So I dumped him, but when he came crawling back, I found out he was cheating and let his new girl know he was playing us both and watched as she kicked him to the curb. I've been seeing this guy for about 9 months. I have really enjoyed dating him, and everything was going pretty smoothly until now. He is a medical student, so he has a very busy schedule, but we've been making it work. His breaks from class are when we get to spend most of our time together, and he's currently on spring break. Well, he comes to town to see me and tells me that we need to talk, and that there was a girl he briefly dated 8 years ago. They didn't end on the best of terms, which he said always bothered him for some reason. He then tells me that he was out of town and met her to briefly talk, and she tried to come on to him, but he denied it due to our relationship. I could have probably moved past this and talked through it, but then he tells me instead of seeing me that night, he needs to go see her to get drinks. He says he knows they're not meant to be together, but he hasn't been able to fully shut that door, and that seeing her will finally help close that chapter for him. I blew up when he told me. I ended things immediately and stormed off. I did come back after an hour so we could further discuss, which we did for quite a few hours. I told him how uncomfortable I am with him pretty much going on a date with a girl, and that it's unfair for him to expect me to wait around to be a second option. He says I'm not a second option, nor does he expect me to wait. This is a him thing, and he needs to do it for him. Now, I could maybe try to move past all of this until he admitted to me yesterday that she stayed over. He is insistent there was nothing physical between them, but it's crappy either way. I do want to briefly add that I was in a 9-year relationship before this that ended in my partner cheating on me and leaving me for the other girl, which he does know because we have discussed our last relationships extensively. So this just is, I guess, opening those wounds again. I'm stuck in a pickle here. I know I don't deserve to be treated this way. I honestly feel really stupid even considering trying to work things out. But I guess my mind and heart just aren't aligning right this second. And cutting ties at 9 months wouldn't be that big of a deal. But good old feelings get in the way. Update. Although I did end things the other day, I just texted him to reiterate that we are done and wished him luck. I know I deserve better than someone who is unsure of me. A second update that is somewhat funny. He let her stay the night because they were both so drunk, and he pissed in the bed. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. That's a no from me. He spent the night with her. Someone he needs to close the door on? No idiots here. Nope. You've been down this road before. Why would you even consider it again? Your self-esteem and pride are worth much more than this. Comment 2. A 32-year-old man needs to have drinks in a bar to get closure with a woman he dated briefly 8 years ago. That's some high-level nonsense right there. Tell him to go get his closure and to lose your number. What a muppet. Now for the update. Thanks for sticking around for more of my drama. So, after I sent that text to officially end things, I thought I'd get some peace. But no, life had other plans. The next day, my ex shows up at my door, eyes all puppy-like, begging for forgiveness. He said he made a mistake, that he was confused and scared about how serious we were getting. I didn't buy it, but I let him in because, well, I'm a sucker for closure. We talked for hours. He confessed that he had feelings for his ex, but realized they were just remnants of the past. He claimed he wanted to be with me, that I was the one he saw a future with. I was torn, but I stood my ground. I told him I needed time to think, and he left looking defeated. But here's where it gets juicy. The next day, I get a call from a friend who works at the hospital where my ex is doing his rotations. She tells me she saw him cozying up with another med student, someone completely new, and I couldn't believe it. I was fuming. All his talk about being confused and wanting me was just a load of crap. I confronted him over the phone, and he didn't even deny it. Said it was nothing serious, just a fling. That's when I realized I was just a doormat to him, someone he could come back to whenever he felt like it. I hung up on him, feeling like a fool for even considering giving him another chance. But life wasn't done with me yet. A couple of days later, I'm at the grocery store, and who do I see? His ex. She walks up to me, all smiles, and says she heard about our breakup. She had the nerve to thank me, saying that because of my indecision, she and my ex had a chance to rekindle their relationship. She said they were giving it another go. I was speechless. I felt like I was in some twisted soap opera where everyone but me knew their lines. I walked away without saying a word, my groceries forgotten on the conveyor belt. I went home, and that's when it hit me. I was always the one bending over backward, trying to make things work, while he just did whatever he wanted. I was done being walked all over. I blocked his number, his social media, everything. It was time to move on. And move on I did. I started focusing on myself, my job, my friends. I even started seeing someone new, someone who actually respects me and my time. So, thanks for reading. It's been a wild ride, but I'm finally getting off this roller coaster. My wife spends 9 years building a life with me only to have an affair with her coworker. So I team up with his wife and expose their office romance in front of everyone at their job. Hello, I'm going to be straightforward. My wife and I have been married for 9 years now, no kids. Great marriage, good compatibility, intimacy life, lots of shared interests, etc. So I never had any reasons to suspect my wife of infidelity until recently. In the summer of 2022, my wife started a new job. Here she meets Mark, 32 years old. My wife and I are very communicative, so I know about Mark from the beginning. All I know about him until the summer of 2023 is that he's a friendly coworker of hers, who has helped her navigate her way around in the beginning, and they are very good friends in the context of work. I know that Mark is married. I'm not aware of them hanging out outside of work during this period of time. In summer 2023, I get introduced to Mark all of a sudden. My wife and I were getting ready to go to the beach in the morning, and she asks me if I mind Mark joining us. As I said, I've always trusted her, so I never thought anything weird about it and said, okay. I liked hanging out with Mark that day. He was cool, even treated us to food and drinks. The next time we went out together, he brought his wife with him. Before I knew it, this form of spending time became the norm. Mark plus me plus my wife, a Mark plus me plus both wives. For a bit, I enjoyed having a squad like this. Probably because I never had that experience when I was younger. And Mark and I actually became quite good friends. We'd even hang out one-on-one. Well, this lasted until January of this year. For Christmas and New Year's, we went on a skiing trip together, all four of us. This is when I started to feel suffocated. Basically, each time I'd try to do something alone with my wife, Mark would join. Each time I'd try to tell my wife that this was bothering me, she'd say to chill because the more the merrier. I ended up spending more time with Mark's wife that vacation because both of us felt like the third wheel. When we returned home, this is how things started to be. I'd tell my wife, hey, let's go have dinner somewhere nice. Then she'd tell me Mark's coming too. She'd basically refuse to spend any private time with me outside the house. The situation also made me start finding Mark irritating. A few weeks ago, I happened to run into someone from their workplace. Couldn't help myself but ask about how they were behaving at work. She told me that they're the unofficial office couple, that my wife likes to jokingly go by Mrs. plus Mark's last name. She told me she never saw anything physical, but emotionally they are basically acting like a married couple. I told my wife and Mark about this, and they said it's just work gossip. Now about the cover part. My wife won't go out with Mark alone, so she drags me along each time with the pretext of a group meeting. I feel like she does this only so that people don't see her alone in public with him and start suspecting an affair. Mark's wife also has the same suspicions and experience. But Mark, just like my wife, says it's an overreaction and gossip. We're both just misunderstanding them. To top things off, this week my younger brother jokingly asked me if Mark is his new brother-in-law because we seem like a throuple. My question is, how do I go about putting an end to this? I honestly don't know if I should just put an end to my marriage. Will my wife ever be honest about this? I love her, but this is becoming unbearable. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I think you need to be more direct. I don't trust you anymore. I think you're lying to me about your feelings for this guy, and I can't be with someone who ignores my feelings like this. You're having an emotional affair. I can see it with my own eyes, and I don't want Mark around anymore under any circumstances, or I'll have to leave for my own sanity and well-being. Comment 2. You should contact Mark's wife and coordinate, then invite them over for dinner and have a surprise confrontation. They are engaged in, at the very least, an emotional affair, and this needs to stop. Both of them need to start looking for new jobs. If the rumors don't stop, well, maybe you can negotiate a 2-for-1 deal with a divorce lawyer. Now for the update. Thanks for sticking around after my last post. Things have taken a turn, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. Just last week, I thought I had a breakthrough. My wife and I were having dinner, just the two of us for once, and I laid it all out. I told her how I felt like I was losing her to Mark, how our marriage was on the line. She broke down, apologized, and promised to set boundaries with Mark. It felt like a win, like we were finally getting back on track. But the next day, she came home from work and said she had to go on a business trip with Mark. It was a 2-day conference, and she assured me it was strictly professional. I wanted to believe her, but it was hard. I spent those 2 days in a fog, trying to distract myself with work and friends. When she got back, she was different, distant. I asked her how the trip went, and she just shrugged it off, saying it was boring and uneventful. But then, I found a receipt in her bag for a romantic dinner for 2. My heart sank. I confronted her, and she admitted they had dinner together, but insisted it was just as colleagues. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying. Meanwhile, Mark's wife reached out to me. She was at her wit's end, too. She had found texts on Mark's phone that were too friendly, too intimate, to be just between coworkers. We met up to talk, and it was like looking in a mirror. The pain, the confusion, the sense of betrayal. It was all there. We decided to do something about it. We planned a surprise visit to their office, just to see for ourselves how they acted around each other. What we saw confirmed our worst fears. They were laughing, touching, sharing inside jokes. It was clear there was more than just friendship there. I felt like I was in a nightmare. I couldn't just stand by and watch my marriage crumble, so I took action. I told my wife we needed to go to couples therapy, that it was non-negotiable if we were going to save our marriage. She agreed reluctantly. The therapy sessions were intense. We dug into our past, our insecurities, our fears. I learned things about my wife I never knew. Her struggles with self-esteem, her need for validation. It was eye-opening, and for a moment, I thought we might actually make it through this. But then, the twist. Just yesterday, my wife came clean. She confessed that she had developed feelings for Mark, that the emotional affair had turned physical during their business trip. She was ashamed, remorseful, and terrified of losing me. But she also admitted she wasn't sure she could cut Mark out of her life completely. I was devastated. I felt like I didn't even know the person I'd been married to for 9 years. But I also saw her vulnerability, her honesty, and I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. We decided to keep going to therapy, to try to rebuild our marriage from the ground up. It's not going to be easy. There's a lot of hurt, a lot of trust to rebuild, but we're both committed to trying. It's a bittersweet feeling, the pain of betrayal mixed with the hope for a new beginning. Thanks for reading. It's been a rough week, but getting this off my chest helps. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.